Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I want to try and get the transmission in. See you in a minute. Now, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when I got the rolling chassis sort of done, if you like, and in a state where it was on four wheels with the rear axle in, that there were effectively, that was about a quarter of the work, and not in terms of time, but in terms of the four main things I think it needed to get done. And that left me with getting the steering connected, getting the engine and gearbox connected, and then connecting me to the cart with pedals, accelerator pedals, brake disc and all that sort of thing. Now I've got the front steering done, so that one's ticked off and pretty much ready to roll. This week I want to have a start and have a look at the fitting the engine and transmission, but it's going to be in two stages. I've spent an awful lot of time worrying about how this was going to work. This goes back almost to the early days when I was still planning the thing, and it was only about 3 or 4 months ago that I came up with the solution in my head, if you like, and that was not to get phased by it all, but to start at the rear axle, which is what I've now got mounted, put a chain wheel on it, and then effectively work backwards. Rather than trying to mount the motor and make it all work to fit, I'd start at the chain wheel and come backwards. So the chain wheel is now on and I know roughly where it needs to go. I've mocked up the engine, but it gives me an idea of where it needs to be. So the next thing in the line is the actual reverse gearbox that I've got, and this is, as I've said before, slightly more than a whim and a bit of extra frippery. It does give me a little bit of a gear reduction that means I can cut down from a 70 to a chain wheel at the back to a 55, which tightens the whole thing up a bit and makes it a bit smaller. So I'm going to try and get the gearbox mounted today. Let's see how we get on with it. It's something I'm not really looking forward to because I'm far less happy dealing with the mechanical bits like this than I am wooden bits, but let's see how we get on with it. We'll go out in the garage and have a go. Now I think I'm pretty much got sorted in my mind where everything is going to go on the rear drive mechanism, and it's time to actually start and put it all together now. I think I've added a vertical pillar there out of a bit of scrap 40/40, which I will bolt to this one as well to give it a bit more strength, but again there's an awful lot of strength in all of this. I've got the bracket that came with the reverse box that slots in nicely into that. That's just basically an interference fit almost, and that will give me a degree of up and down movement on that nut if I want to. And so all I've got to do now is fabricate some top brackets to hold this gearbox up at that level. It's not a problem on this side because it'll pretty much be flush with the side of the 40/40 aluminium there. The problem I've got is that the gearbox is 70mm wide and this is 40mm increments, so the other plate will sort of land somewhere in the middle, and I've got to just figure out a way of getting that other side located back safely. But I'm going to start with this side anyway, get a bracket made up that will bolt roughly like that. It'll pivot around that bolt as well. I'm not sure quite whether I'm going to build any adjustment in it for this up and down business. I've got to think about that one, but that effectively puts that line exactly where I want it. That gear line is running just a fraction outside this bed engine mount level when it's straight, so I can line those two up, and there isn't going to be far between the two for the chain. and then the motor will sit on this part with the drive out the back, and that will connect up to the TAV up there, and I can measure that distance between there and the output from the motor shaft to get my TAV belt length, because I'm using an extended belt. So it's relatively straightforward. Effectively all I've done is replace the top mount of the original Comet type TAV with this reverse gearbox, and that's just given me that little bit of gearing down that I needed to get a smaller chain wheel in. So I think that's it. We've got some aluminium, same as that for the engine bed, to make the bracket. That should be more than enough. That's 6mm I think, so we can make our brackets for there and start and get it mounted. And that's sort of half the job done, because once that's done I can then mount the motor with this distance between there and the motor output, and then I can bolt that down to the engine plates at the back. Right, that's the first bracket made. It's not the most elegant yet, but we'll worry about making it pretty later on. But that's already starting to get where I want to be. But obviously at the moment there's a degree of wobble that way because it's only actually being held in one plane. So I'm going to make a similar bracket for the other side and then worry about how I can get the fixings to work in that gap effectively. I've probably got to put a couple of sleeves in and clamp between the two, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Let's get the thing made first. Okay, that's got a second bracket made now, so all I need to do, I've put another mounting hole in the bottom so that I've got two that go straight through that way. I can put a spacer in there that will just go with the rod going straight through the both of them. That'll brace these two bits apart, and then I need to make some spacers for that gap there, which again I'll be using the 40/40 aluminium, I expect. They're 30mm, and that means you can then clamp those pair tight to hold the bracket to this upright, and this one will hold the upright and brace it to that one. I mean, it's already getting pretty solid now. I don't think there's a great deal of trouble going to come from that. By the time I get that bracing bar in there, that'll stop any twist getting into this bar, and then the spacers in here will stop the brackets moving independently. So let's go and cut some brackets, some spacers I mean. Right, so that's it all spacered up, bolted up, solid and rigid now. I haven't got that one tightened up at the bottom, but it really doesn't need it. That whole thing has become really solid now. So I just want to check that I've got alignment on the sprocket wheel with the main gear, which I'm pretty certain I have now, and we're ready to effectively sling the chain on there now, and that will give me the first half of the transmission. And then all, as I say, I've got to do then is just mount the motor. So very pleased with that. It's nice and solid, and I mustn't forget to put some oil in the gearbox before I start using it. There's no spring washers or anything on this at the moment, because it's just getting lashed up to get it all effectively working. But the whole thing will be stripped down and fitted with proper washers, and we'll do something about the shape of this bracket and make it slightly more elegant. But at the moment it's doing its... Right, now I've just come to start mounting the motor, and I've hit a bit of a snag. If you look at the gearbox where the chain comes out of it and goes down to the chain wheel, the distance between that chain and the TAV belt is wider than it would have been if the top pulley was on the proper metal backing plate that came with the TAV. And as a consequence, what it means is that that belt doesn't line up with that pulley. Now, you might think the simple answer is then just to move the whole motor across, but because I'm so tight for space here, if I do that, I'm going to start rubbing the chain on the casing of the motor. And I can see what the problem is, but I've just got to go away and find out how to deal with it. That top shaft on the gearbox has got a piece protruding which is 20mm, as opposed to the, I think it's 16 or 17mm that shaft is, that the top pulley slides onto. So what I really need to do is to either, I've got three options. You move the engine. Well, I can't do that because I'm too close, and the chain will then rub on the casing. I can get that shaft turned down, but that will mean ripping the gearbox apart and getting it off to an engineering place. Or I can do a ghetto engineer, I think, which is to basically drill out to 20mm the first part of that shaft, that hole I mean in the top pulley, just about 10mm. It only needs to be about that deep, just so that it will slide over a bit further, and then the whole thing will line up. So I think that's got to be the first thing before I actually get the motor mounted, because until I've got that line sorted between the two as to being dead straight, I can't actually start and bolt the motor down. Right, so welcome to Ghetto Engineering Corner. This is the TAV top pulley that I need to just take out slightly larger than it is at the moment, 20mm. It's a 17mm shaft. I've got a 20mm drill. I've got the pulley anchored down relatively tightly, although I'm not sure it'll be enough. I'm set the drill very slow. I'm just going to see if I can take it down. It only needs to go in about 5 or 10mm, but I just want to see if I can get any joy with it this way round. So fingers crossed. This is only really for clearance, so it sort of doesn't matter if it's not dead straight and square, if you like, as long as it's giving clearance to the shoulder on the axle that the pulley runs on, but I would like to get it somewhere right. Well, the principle's working. I need to just go and check it now and see if in reality it's doing what I want it to do. Certainly doesn't need a lot more. Well, it's certainly not pretty, but it will, I hope, do the job. What we've got to do is get past that but not hit that. Oh yes, I think I'm happy with that. I've got a millimetre or two I might take out if I wanted to, but I think that's fine. That should give me the lining up that I need now between those two pulleys. Yeah, I think I'm going to get a lot better than that. Good. So that puts to bed the transmission. Time to mount the engine next. Right, so I'm really happy with that. It seems solid, seems as if it's going to hold together. Time alone will tell with all of this. There will come a point when either it will break, in which case it's what happens, you know, race, break, repair, repeat. You just keep going and improving the breed, if you like. If it breaks, I'll find out where, and then we can move on and get it mended. The biggest problem all along has been working without welding. It would be relatively simple, I'm sure, to start welding up brackets and things to get this slot working with steel, but I'm bolting it together with aluminium, so there is a chance that it's all going to go horribly wrong, but that's part of the fun of all this. As long as you start and test slowly, take it easily in stages, start and run it at, you know, 5 miles an hour and 10 miles an hour for a bit and see what falls off, what's coming loose, when it throws chains and all that sort of thing, and get it mended until you've got a point where you feel comfortable with it, and then you can move on from there. So that's as far as I'm going with it this week. Hopefully next time we'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart, and I look forward to seeing you then. Bye!